The Bruins added some key pieces in free agency, but they also lost some key players as well. Let's talk about where the Bruins stand here now that the frenzy is over.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoke to Be. Today is Friday, July 5th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Before we get into it today, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. You can find me, my dad jokes, hockey thoughts at Ian C. McLaren, a lifelong Bruins fan. I've been covering this team for various outlets for almost 20 years now. Worked for 5 years as a hockey news editor at The Score and have been doing this podcast since 2019. A lot of changes over that time, and this offseason is no different. Some new faces, some players that we've grown to know and love have moved on. Where exactly do the Bruins stand at the end of the initial free agent frenzy? And as we begin kind of the dog days of summer here with things really slowing down. We'll start up front where the Bruins added Elias, Lindholm, as well as Mark Kastelic via trade with the Ottawa Senators. The Korpisalo Ullmark deal that allowed them to get a first-round pick as well. They also signed Max Jones as a depth option. Those are probably the main guys up front that will compete. Well, obviously, Lindholm has a spot on the opening night roster, barring injury. But those are Max Jones is probably the other guy that they signed who has a realistic chance at cracking the roster. Riley Tufte perhaps in there as well. As I discussed yesterday with Thomas Drance of The Athletic and Sportsnet, the Bruins also lost some key wingers. And while it was important for them to shore up the center position, and they got a prototypical Bruins center in Lindholm, a guy who can excellently play both ends of the ice. You heard Drance say he's still an elite defensive forward. Not quite the offensive finisher that he has been in the past. Unlikely to reach the 40-goal mark once again or average a point per game, but 60 points, 70 maybe is very realistic. They still lost Danton, Heinen, and more notably, Jake DeBrusk on the wings. And they were already kind of winger deficient here in the postseason. You already had Danton Heinen playing in the top six. You had Morgan Geekie in the top six at times. Jake DeBrusk was a staple in the top six over the past couple of years after moving up and down the lineup under Bruce Cassidy, finally finding his footing alongside Brad Marchand and Patrice Bergeron. And then on top of that, developing into a very good defensive forward who killed penalties and was one of their speediest guys on the forecheck as well. That's a big loss for the Boston Bruins. And how are they going to compensate for those losses on the wing? Not to mention Jesper Boqvist, who I did not mention yesterday in terms of guys who have moved on. He signed a deal with the Florida Panthers. Right now, you can pretty much pencil in a line of Pavel Zacha, Lindholm, and David Pastrnak up front as your top line. Other than that, it gets a bit murky, and there are some questions as to who slots in where. Brad Marchand, of course, your second line left winger. You could pair him with Charlie Coyle. Maybe Morgan Geekie plays on the right side of that line. Or you have Matt Poitras on the third line playing with Trent Frederic on the left side, and perhaps Fabian Lysell is able to earn a shot. We'll talk more next week about the young guys who have opportunities to step up here. Those kind of two lines, somewhat interchangeable. And that's really depending on Poitras continuing his upward trajectory. He was very promising last year as a rookie before getting injured. You want him to come back stronger, better, and ready to take on pretty big minutes for the Boston Bruins. And it also depends on Fabian Lysell being able to claim a spot as a winger for the Boston Bruins who can play night in and night out, contribute offensively, most importantly, but also play responsibly enough without the puck that he's not hurting the team. And that was a question from Providence head coach Ryan Mugina last season. And by all accounts, he responded to that call admirably and did indeed step up his game without the puck. On the fourth line, you have guys like John Beecher and Justin Brazeau, who emerged last season as bona fide contributors for the Boston Bruins in depth roles. And then you have Mark Kastelic, who was acquired in that Ottawa trade, and Max Jones competing as kind of the 13th forwards. Justin Brazeau maybe in that mix as well. Maybe Georgi Merkulov steps up and grabs a spot. But in my mind, you're still kind of thin on the right side, especially. You have David Pastrnak, all-world, elite, one of the best wingers in the NHL. But then you're banking on maybe top 6 contributions for Morgan Geekie, a breakout from Fabian Lysell, Justin Brazeau to continue to show that he is an NHLer, a regular NHLer, which he had not been able to do prior to last season. The left side looking pretty good. Zaka, of course, a center, but he's going to be shifted to the wing. Marchand, Frederic. Maybe Frederic jumps up into the top 6 and is kind of called upon to be more of what Jake DeBrusk offered. Toning down the physicality, some of the recklessness, which he has. He's very defensively responsible. He has grown in that area of his game. Maybe it's time for him to jump up into the top 6 and step up his game as well. And then you have Beecher, Kastelic, Jones, they're battling. But there's still, some depth needed on the right side, I believe. I've been mentioning the possibility of, at the very least, a PTO for Filip Zadina, who had 13 goals, 23 points for San Jose last season, minus 44 for those of you who care about that. But obviously they were a very bad team, the worst in the NHL last season. Pair him with Zaka and Pastrnak, maybe you have something there. Maybe you can redeem that, what was he, 9th overall pick back in 6th overall pick back in 2018. He's still only 24. Still something there, I believe. You could mine something there and bring him in with his fellow Czechians. There's also Daniel Sprong, who for some reason remains unsigned. He's got 43 points, 18 goals in 76 games last season. He's a guy who, if the Bruins could find the money, would be a great addition. He's not going to break the bank. Similar to Danton Heinen in that kind of bouncing around, making a bit more money than him, more offensively minded, but only 12 minutes of average ice time last year, and he had 18 goals. That's a guy that you should be looking at for some added pop. You could also potentially look at a guy like Kyler Yamamoto, also a first-round pick. He was in 2017, 22nd overall. You did already sign Jones and Tufte, who were first-round picks in 2016. Maybe see if you can get something out of Yamamoto, who had 8 goals 8 assists, 16 points in 59 games for the Seattle Kraken last season, but did hit 20 goals and 41 points 3 seasons ago as a member of the Edmonton Oilers. So that's where we stand up front. They got that center depth enough that they can move Zach into the wing, but that is telling in that they still need help on the wing. Right side, maybe left side. That's something that needs to be addressed, whether it be throughout the rest of the summer or prior to the trade deadline next season. What about on the blue line? We'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, and the eBay Guaranteed Fit is available only to U.S. customers. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And while you're on YouTube, check out Locked On Sports Today. All the latest news, analysis, and opinions from across the Locked On universe, free on YouTube and the Amazon Fire TV app. All right, we discussed the forwards, the Bruins shoring up the center position with Lindholm adding some depth in Max Jones, but also losing some key players in Danton, Heinen, Jake DeBrusk, Jesper Boqvist, James Van Riemsdyk also gone. I forgot to mention him, although he has yet to sign elsewhere. Perhaps there is a Bruins 2.0 tour in the works on the cheap, but wouldn't necessarily address them adding that speed element. On defense, of course, the big addition, big being the operative word, was Nikita Zadorov. And he's a guy that is going to be an instant fan favorite, according to Thomas Drance, who we talked to yesterday. Drance calling him one of his favorite players to watch in the NHL, period. He's big. He is super fun to watch, and he can chip in offensively. Defense is first, being physical, being hard to play against, but he also likes to skate and score sometimes. And it's always fun to watch him, just take the puck and try to do something fun. He said one of the reasons he came to Boston is because of Jim Montgomery. He spent a couple weeks skating with him when he was coaching at the university in Denver when Zadorov was a member of the Avalanche. Knows him personally a little bit and has heard very good things. And I think he's going to fit in very well. Now, the Bruins on the blue line, there's some up and down that's possible there as well. You could start with Mason Lohrei skating with Charlie McAvoy, Nikita Zadorov skating maybe on the third pair with Andrew Peeke, keeping that Hampus Lindholm, Brandon Carlo connection together. Or you could have Zadorov skating with McAvoy, move Lindholm down with Peeke, Lohrei with Carlo, or move Lohrei down with Peeke, and again have Zadorov on the top pairing with Parker Wotherspoon as the extra defenseman. Now, for my money, the Bruins, pretty well set on defense. There is still some depth worries. If you remember in the playoffs, they had like 8, 9 healthy defensemen with Matt Grzelcyk, Kevin Shattenkirk, Derek Forbort in the mix as well. Forbort signing with the Canucks. Shattenkirk is a free agent still. Grzelcyk is a Pittsburgh Penguin. But this top 6, if healthy, that should be a pretty versatile, and formidable unit that I'm pretty excited about. And while there's still questions up front for me, the defense, you add Zadorov, you know exactly what you're going to get. And the Bruins have a pretty solid top six there, in my opinion. Do they need to address the depth? Yes. Parker Wotherspoon is your seventh defenseman at the moment. And then after that, you're looking to the farm to call someone up, and pretty thin there in terms of depth. You know, your more established guys, I guess Ian Mitchell would be the first man up. They did sign Jordan Osterley to a 2-year, two-way contract that pays him $775,000. He played 22 games for the Flames last season with 2 assists. He's got 371 games of NHL experience, 86 points in that time. So he would be a candidate to be recalled, as well as Ian Mitchell. Those are probably your 2 more established guys on the back end on the farm. After that, you're looking at Billy Sweezy was signed to a $775,000 contract. He is a 28-year-old who has appeared in only 9 NHL games 2 seasons ago with the Columbus Blue Jackets. So probably not a guy that you're looking to rely on, a guy that brings a lot of physicality and some literal punch to his game as well. So again, the Bruins, they still have a couple RFAs to deal with on the blue line as well, in Michael Callahan, Alec Regula, and Mark McLaughlin up front. Probably need to add a bit more depth at some point on the blue line. But their top 6, as it stands, including or with Parker Wotherspoon added to that, I think is pretty good. And Zadorov, likely to see plenty of time playing alongside McAvoy, who he has always respected as an opponent. Zadorov said he's watched McAvoy a lot, one of his favorite D-men in the league for sure. The way he plays, he's got some grit, open ice hits. That fits well with his style as well. He played unbelievably against Toronto, Zadorov said, in the playoffs. Definitely fun to watch, and in Florida as well. He wants to get up there on the top pair and complement McAvoy, help him to be good. Maybe he can create something a little bit more offensively as well, because he can trust Zadorov to be behind him and help as he can be more aggressive. It's important in this league to kill plays quickly and then don't let the team have much time in the D zone, neutral zone, close things quick. I think Zadorov could be a great complement to McAvoy. Now, again, you look at what Drance was saying yesterday. He's not necessarily, he's being paid as a 2-3 defenseman, but he's probably more of a 4-5. So do you want McAvoy paired with him, or do you put Lohrei up with McAvoy? Lohrei could be a top 4 defenseman at some point, a lot more offensive upside as well, but then you'd be asking McAvoy to do a lot more defensively. Maybe you want to free him up like Zadorov's willing to do, to add some more. If we want McAvoy to win the Norris, he's going to have to raise his point totals. Maybe pairing him with Zadorov is the way to go. That would leave you with Lohrei Peak on your third pairing. Could be some question marks there, unless you put Lohrei with Carlo and have Lindholm bounce down. I know a lot of people have an appetite to move Lindholm's contract. Still quite a few years left on that. He signed through 29-30 at $6.5 million. So that's 6 more seasons. It's going to be hard to move, even if you wanted to, which I don't think the Bruins do. I think you saw him get better as the season went on last year, and he should be much more comfortable to start this season, I believe. So that's the situation on defense. What about in net? Well, we talked about it earlier this week. Jeremy Swayman, we need to get you signed ASAP. We'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. All right, we've established the Bruins could use some help up front. Pretty well set on defense. In net, well, there's the huge elephant in the room, which is Jeremy Swayman remaining a restricted free agent with no contract for the upcoming season or beyond. Right now, you have Joonas Korpisalo signed at $3 million per season for the next 4 years. With Swayman, I have no doubts that he will sign at some point, but let's just get it done. I mean, what is the holdup at this point? The Bruins have around $8.6 million in available cap space. Perhaps they're wanting to get that closer to 7 or below. I'm sure Swayman's hoping for 7.5 and above. The term shouldn't be a problem. Just get him signed to a max contract term-wise, and hopefully they can establish a firm valuation. I believe it was Fluto Shinzawa who wrote an article this morning talking about how Jeremy Swayman could be one of the best goalies in the NHL. But he's never had a full season as a number one goalie, and perhaps that's the hesitation in terms of what the valuation should be at. There's perhaps some variance in Swayman's perceived value, as his ceiling is pretty high, but you only have what you have to work with. Thatcher Demko is playing on a $5 million contract at the moment and getting amazing value for the Vancouver Canucks. Swayman's AAV on a 4-year contract projected by Evolving Hockey is $6.253 million. An 8-year contract projected by an anonymous agent coming in at $7.5 million, which is just a shade under what UC Saros just signed on an 8-year contract on July 1st. Of course, you have Andrei Vasilevsky making $9.5 million, and Dom Lucian of the Athletic projecting an $11 million contract for Jeremy Swayman on an 8-year deal, which the Bruins at the moment cannot afford. So there's a lot of variance here in terms of what the projection should be, and what the forecast on his next deal should be. According to Dom Lucian's model, he's expected to save 106.4 goals above expected over an 8-year deal, which is better than what Connor Hellebuck has done in the 6 years following his age 24 season. So Lucian is expecting Swayman to be one of the best goalies in the world over the next 8 years. He's one of the Bruins' 3 foundational players, along with David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy. The Bruins trading Linus Ullmark signals that they believe in Swayman, but they need to compensate him in a way that shows that they do trust him. There's no reason to play hardball at this point. There's no reason to come in and say, yeah, we believe in you, but let's bridge, or let's extend the term but lower the valuation. It just doesn't make sense. Committing to 8 years is a bit scary, and it could be a gamble. But Swayman has passed every checkpoint with high marks, including and especially in this last playoff run, where he was essentially the main reason the Bruins got as far as they did. You'd want to get closer to the Evolving Hockey projection, which is 6.253. That would place him above Jordan Binnington, Jacob Markstrom, and just below John Gibson. Probably should be paid higher than most of those guys. Maybe you look at Andrei Vasilevsky as comparable, but I mean, he's all world, and has 2 cups to his name. So at any rate, the Bruins need to get Swayman signed, and hopefully quickly. Do not play hardball. They've both expressed neither party wants to go to arbitration. That could get very messy and send a devastating message to Swayman and, could tempt him to sign an offer sheet, which it would be a terrible scenario for the Boston Bruins. You cannot go into next season having lost or having traded Linus Ullmark and having lost Jeremy Swayman because you did not want to pony up and pay him what he deserves. It just can't happen. You can't go into next season with Joonas Korpisalo and Brandon Bussi. They would not be a playoff team with that goaltending tandem. And they're going to experience a bit of a drop-off, likely with Swayman carrying a heavier load and Korpisalo, unless he can find top form, you're not going to have that elite goaltending night in and night out if Swayman's carrying a heavier load and if Korpisalo is what he was last season. You can get away with that in the playoffs, just sticking with one guy, but you want Swayman arriving to that point, not having played 60 regular season games or 65 if the case be. Anyways, sign him now, pay him, pay the man. Don't mess around, Don. Just get it done. So the Bruins need to sign Swayman. If they have some leftover money, yeah, it'd be great to pursue Daniel Sprong or maybe a PTO for Zadina and Yamamoto to have a bit of flexibility to add some scoring before the season starts. On defense, everything looks pretty good with their top 6. I don't expect any changes there. And that's it. A full recap of where the Bruins are post-free agent frenzy and the trade with the Senators. That brings us up to speed. Next week, we'll focus on the youngsters, take a look back at development camp, see who has a chance at making an impact on the big roster next season, and just bring you all the latest with respect to the Boston Bruins, because we are Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. Please have a fun, safe, happy weekend. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we'll be back to talk more Boston Bruins on Monday here on Locked On Boston Bruins.